was one. Forgive me for all I've done.
Paul Atreides is the most powerful man in the known universe. He sits on the throne of Arrakis. He commands armies numbering in the billions. He can see the future. And the very first thing he says in the Dune Part 3 trailer is, "Forgive me for all I've done." Not a battle cry, not a declaration of power, a confession, an apology to people who will never hear it and probably wouldn't accept it if they did. And if you understand what those words actually mean in the context of Frank Herbert's Dune Messiah, the novel this film is adapting, then you already know this movie is not going to feel anything like the first two. The hero's journey is over. What comes next is the bill. Denis Villeneuve just dropped the most intense trailer footage of the year, and it is doing something genuinely rare for a blockbuster preview. It is not trying to sell you spectacle. It is trying to make you feel the weight of consequence. Every shot in this thing carries the specific gravity of a story about what happens after you win, after the prophecy is fulfilled, after the chosen one takes the throne he was destined for. Because Herbert's answer to that question, and Villeneuve's answer, based on what this trailer is showing, is that winning looks a lot like a different kind of losing. Let's go through everything, because there is a tremendous amount packed into this footage, and some of it you can only fully appreciate if you understand what the source material is doing underneath the visuals. The opening line does everything it needs to do in about 4 seconds. "Forgive me for all I've done." That is Paul speaking about what happens between the end of Part 2 and where Part 3 begins. A galactic holy war waged in his name across the known universe. Billions of people have died. Entire civilizations have been reshaped by violence carried out in the name of a god that Paul never asked to become and never believed himself to be. The prescience that once felt like power has calcified into something he calls the Golden Path, a vision of the only future in which humanity survives, reached through acts so terrible that Paul has accepted he will never be redeemed for them. He is not hoping for forgiveness. He is documenting a debt he knows can never be paid. The Hans Zimmer composition playing under those opening moments is titled, fittingly, The Golden Path. Zimmer named the track after the concept directly, which means the person scoring this film understood from the beginning that the emotional center of Dune Messiah is not triumph or action or romance. It is a man walking a road that destroys everything it touches, including him, because he has seen that every other road ends in extinction. That is not a superhero story. That is tragedy at a cosmic scale, and the trailer earns that framing immediately. The significant time jump between Part 2 and Part 3 is visible in almost every frame, but the scene that carries the most emotional weight is Paul meeting with Chani. You can feel years of distance between them in the way they exist in the same space. At the end of Part 2, Chani was betrayed, not in a single dramatic moment, but through a slow accumulation of choices Paul made that prioritized empire over their relationship. He chose the political marriage to Princess Irulan. He chose the throne. He chose the path he saw in his visions over the person standing in front of him. And Chani, who had loved him and believed in him before anyone in power did, left. Years have passed. She is still in his life in some capacity. The war and the world have not allowed a clean separation, but the resentment has not diminished, and the trailer gives us one of the most quietly devastating visual metaphors in the entire preview. Chani takes the blue ribbon she wears around her head and releases it to the wind. If you know Fremen culture, you know exactly what that gesture means. In the desert, among her people, that is a divorce. Not a fight, not an ultimatum, a declaration delivered to the open air, which is somehow worse than any confrontation would be. What was between them is over in the only language she has left for it. Sharp-eyed viewers will catch something else in those non-linear flashback sequences. Evidence that Paul and Chani's children from the books have already been born within the timeline. Those glimpses are brief and deliberately fragmentary. It is acknowledging them the way the story does, as part of a past that has already been shaped by choices that cannot be undone. Let's talk about Alia, because the decision to do a significant time jump is largely driven by her character's needs, and the trailer suggests she is going to be one of the most compelling elements of the entire film. Anya Taylor-Joy is stepping into the role as an adult, a commanding, deeply unsettling presence whose story in Dune Messiah is rooted in a tragedy that begins before she was born. Lady Jessica took the water of life while pregnant with her. That act awakened Alia to the full consciousness of all her ancestral memories before she had the developmental framework to process them. The Bene Gesserit have a word for what she is: abomination, not said with cruelty, or not only cruelty, but with the specific fear of people who understand exactly what it means to have thousands of past lives echoing through a mind that was never trained to hold them. The trailer gives us a shot of Alia walking past a row of crucified bodies with an expression that reads as somewhere between serene and absent, like someone watching a landscape rather than an atrocity. We see her temple, dedicated to Saint Alia of the Knife, which is the kind of image that tells you where her arc is heading without spelling it out. She is being worshipped. She is being consumed by what she is worshipped for. And the madness creeping into her at the edges of every scene she appears in is not dramatic license. It is the book's central tragedy about what it costs to exist as she exists. Jason Momoa is back, and the context of his return is one of the most interesting pieces of science fiction plotting in the source material. He is not playing Duncan Idaho anymore, or rather, he is playing a version of Duncan Idaho that should not exist. He is Hate, a Ghola, a clone grown by the Bene Gesserit from the genetic material of the original Duncan, complete with the memories and fighting abilities of the man Paul loved and lost. The Spacing Guild and the Gesserit present him to Paul as a gift. He is a weapon disguised as grief. The mechanism is psychologically precise in a way that is almost cruel. Paul's love for Duncan Idaho is real and deep and well established. The conspirators are counting on that love to lower Paul's defenses, to create a vulnerability in the most prescient, most powerful man alive by giving him back the face of someone he mourned. The Duncan Ghola has been programmed, somewhere underneath the authentic memories, to assassinate the Emperor at the right moment. The tense dialogue between Paul and Hate that the trailer shows us inside Alia's temple is the visible surface of that tension. Two people who share something real and something false simultaneously. Neither of them fully certain where the line between those things falls. The political landscape of Dune Part 3 is more layered than almost anything the first two films attempted. And the trailer sketches the shape of three distinct conspiracies against Paul's rule without fully explaining any of them, which is the right choice. The Fremen and Gesserit plot involves a face dancer, a shape-shifting agent named Scytale. Robert Pattinson is playing the role, which is casting that makes complete sense once you think about it for 3 seconds. Pattinson has spent the last decade building a body of work defined by his ability to be simultaneously compelling and deeply unnerving, often within the same scene. Scytale requires exactly that quality. The brief audio clip in the trailer, that very specific accent he's chosen for the character, is already generating significant discussion online. And based on what Pattinson does when given real creative latitude, the reaction in context is probably going to be stronger than anything a trailer clip suggests. The Ghola plot is the emotional conspiracy, the one that works on Paul through Duncan, through memory, through love. The third threat involves Princess Irulan and the Bene Gesserit, who are increasingly terrified of Paul's prescience. His ability to see the future makes him essentially immune to the kind of manipulation the Sisterhood has built their power on across millennia. You cannot deceive someone who can see the shape of your deception in advance. Irulan's position is particularly complicated. Married to Paul, loyal to the Bene Gesserit, afraid of the man she is technically bound to, and genuinely uncertain whether that fear is reasonable or something she's been conditioned to feel. The whispered conversations in shadows that the trailer shows us are the visible edge of a much larger machinery working against Paul from multiple directions at once. Now, the moment in the trailer that tells you exactly where the third act lives. Paul, bald, a blindingly bright flash of light, his hands moving to protect someone, severe scarring around his eyes in the aftermath. This is the stone burner incident, and it is one of the most significant turning points in Dune Messiah. A stone burner is an illegal atomic weapon, illegal even by the relaxed standards of a universe that has already seen what unchecked technology does to civilizations, that burns at a temperature that destroys the eyes of anyone in its radius who isn't shielded. Paul is caught in it. He is physically blinded. And here is the specific horror of his situation that the book handles with devastating precision, and that the trailer is clearly setting up. His prescience remains intact. He can still see. He has always been able to see in ways that have nothing to do with his physical eyes. But now his blindness is externally visible to everyone around him, and for a man who has been elevated to God status by people who believe his sight is divine, walking the world with scarred, sightless eyes creates a very specific kind of pressure that the story explores in ways that are difficult to summarize without diminishing them. The final lingering image of Paul with that damage visible on his face is the trailer's most quietly powerful shot. It is the film telling you, he won, and this is what winning looks like. The scope visible in the rest of the footage is genuinely staggering. Fremen warriors standing on alien planets staring at massive oceans, a contrast to Arrakis's endless sand that communicates the scale of the Holy War without a single line of exposition. Towering statues of Paul's likeness erected across worlds he has never visited. An empire so large that its god emperor exists mostly as an image, an idea, a face on monuments, rather than a human being anyone can actually reach. And behind Robert Pattinson's Scytale, a glimpse of a guild navigator in a transportation pod, Edric, the navigator who appears in Messiah. The design appears to lean heavily into the genuinely strange concept art from the books, rather than softening it for palatability, which suggests Villeneuve is committed to rendering this universe at full Herbert-intended weirdness. What Denis Villeneuve is attempting with this trilogy is something that blockbuster cinema almost never tries. He is making the third film the point where the audience has to confront what they were actually rooting for across the first two. The prophecy was real, the hero won, the power was claimed, and the outcome is billions dead, a man consumed by a future he can see but cannot escape. His love destroyed by the choices his destiny demanded, his sister dissolving into madness, and enemies closing in from every direction, specifically because winning made him the most dangerous thing in the universe. Dune Messiah is Herbert's argument that the genre conventions we use to tell hero stories are themselves a kind of lie, and Villeneuve has had 2 films to earn the right to make that argument on screen. The question is not whether this is going to be dark. The trailer makes that obvious. The question is whether audiences who fell in love with Paul Atreides across the first 2 films are ready to watch the story do to him what it does. Because the golden path does not feel golden from inside it. It feels like a man walking alone towards something necessary and terrible, saying forgive me to no one in particular, and knowing the answer will never come. What moment from the trailer hit you hardest? And for those of you who've read Dune Messiah, is there a specific scene you are most hoping Villeneuve gets right? Drop everything in the comments, because this is the conversation I want to be having between now and whenever this film actually arrives.